Welcome. So, it started like all good ideas do in the pub. This pub specifically, which is my local Wetherspoons. And here we are at the urinals. These are my colleagues. Here I am taking a whiz. And here is Dan. Now, Dan has a problem. Dan is quite shy. And so Dan, fortunately for us though, has a plan. He gets out his cape in the Wetherspoons toilets. He suction cups it to the wall. Yes, with an actual suction cup. And now Dan isn't so shy and the pee can come free. This, I'd like to introduce to you, is the Privy Pee, which was a prototype invention we came up for a plumbing client. And this got put on their blog. And the results immediately were really good because we outreached this as sort of a concept piece, got on places like the Metro and the Huffington Post and all that. It did so well that at one point it became a bit of a meme on Tumblr. So 10 points to Piss Indoor. And here's my colleague Dan all over the internet in that cape. But then things got really crazy when we got on the Today Show in America. So this is sort of mainstream breakfast television. Here's the back of my head peeing in a Wetherspoons urinal on national US television. And then the staff around the table discussing this on TV were kind of like, is this a normal thing to happen in Europe? Is this what British people do? And this guy's face is sort of, is he confused, slightly aroused? I don't know. But for those who are unfamiliar with the concept of SEO, basically the P-cape got us the links got us the ranks got us the traffic, and the traffic got us the money. So the P-cape got us the money. This is just one of several stupid ideas that us as an agency have done over the years, and I'll be discussing all of these at the end, so stay tuned for that. I am Oliver Brett. Here's me last year at SearchLeeds. I am wearing a different shirt, so that's good. I work for an agency called Screaming Frog. You may know us for our software, which Sharon mentioned earlier. Yeah, you can crawl lots of websites to do all the technical stuff. If this is making you fall asleep, it used to look like this. So we've sort of made progress there, I guess. But don't worry about that. I also run a stupid Lord of the Rings Twitter account, which I'm going to plug. It's called Lord of the Serps, and I just post GIFs of like dumb SEO problems that people have and relate them to Lord of the Rings memes. This is a weird industry. So like when your client updates their meta keywords with their page titles, when they move without any redirects, when the PPC show you their Black Friday budget, that kind of stuff. But anyway, I probably should have flogged like my business or something, but we're past that slide now anyway. Back to P-capes. So Linkbait is the type of project that we like to call these things. What is Linkbait? Well, it has a definition on Google. Apparently, it is content designed to attract the attention and encourage those viewing to create hyperlinks to the site. What's interesting about the Google definition of this is the quote they've used for the word in like an actual sentence. They've said, at first, he tried to create Linkbait to get his site noticed. The at first makes it think that maybe they're onto us. And I would just like to disclaim, while this is the link building stage, we're just doing this for brand awareness. Even if we're lying to people, we're not lying, we're manipulating reality. Everything we're doing is just for like brand signals and PR stuff. And if John Moo is at the back, you know, it's not about links, even though we're on the link stage. You know why I'm here, I know why I'm here, but yeah, anyway. Another topic that you may call this stuff is newsjacking, which was mentioned earlier. Again, newsjacking is a definition, taking advantage of current events and news stories to promote or advertise one's product or brand. And yeah, again, a lot of these things relate to topical things in the news, so that's something to be aware of. And then you might also call these things PR stunts. PR stunts also has a definition, but I won't bore you with that. You could call these things fake news because we're not, as I said, we're not lying, we're manipulating the truth. And they also get in the news. It's a bit of a clickbait title there, sorry. So to explain these things, I put together this super scientific graph that sort of showcases where these projects fit within the wider spectrum of link building techniques. And admittedly, at first, it looks quite complicated, but don't worry, I'm going to break this down. I know you guys are content people, but I will explain this graph. So at the bottom here, we have the risk, which goes from 0 to 10. So a low-risk thing might be Googling and searching for Screaming Frog on Google. A high-risk thing might be looking up Screaming Frog on YouTube. But in all seriousness, this sort of relates to, will this type of activity give me a penalty? Or will Google be upset if I do this kind of thing? And also, how mad will people be if it flops? Because obviously, if you invest lots of money in something, your clients aren't going to be very happy with you if it doesn't get any results. At the bottom here, we have the reward section, and that basically goes from low-tier blogs right up to big national coverage. So that could be domain authority, if you want to think in that way. So the first group of things we have is called old school tactics. These include things like building directory links and blogger outreach and sort of very low-tier stuff. I've grouped these here where they're quite low risk and quite low reward, because these types of projects worked really well in 2009, but since then, journalists and news publications have become a lot wiser, and so have search engines. We've got to try a lot harder. So these things sort of worked really well in 2009 when the industry was just sort of kicking off. In 2009, word art was really good. My hair was really bad. Word art is now really bad, and my hair is still really bad. So I don't know what you want to take from that. The next section is called What the Frog Are You Doing? This includes things like buying 50,000 backlinks for £5. Please don't do that. And private blog networks, again, they're quite high risk and quite low reward, because potentially Google and that might not take to those kind of link building methods. So I put them up there. The next section is public relations, which is probably the main way we build links. It's a very safe, very reliable way, very sort of white hat method of doing things. There's lots of different ways you can do public relations, sort of chasing up unlinked mentions, filling out press requests for journalists, doing press releases, doing survey pieces. Ego bait is another good one that a lot of people are starting to do, where you essentially email 20 people in an industry and say, hey, you're an expert. Why don't you send me your 3 top tips for 2019 SEO? And if you're an idiot like me, you'll fall for it, and then you'll write them a nice detailed thing, and they'll take that content, and then they can build links with it. So that's a great way of sort of a safe and reliable way of building links. So it's kind of low risk, but potentially the rewards could be higher. I mean, you can do well with any of these tactics, really. But if you really want to push the boat out, you've got to try content marketing, I suppose, taking more risks. Now, you might be thinking immediately, oh, infographics are obviously what content is. Infographics I've put here, where they're sort of moderate risk and moderate reward. We try to avoid them these days. That is because if you look at the sort of Google Trends data of infographics, you can see they really sort of took off. And this is where SEO started spamming them in about 2015. And since then, they've been on a slightly downward trajectory, essentially because journalists have got wise. And now if they see infographic in the subject line, they're probably not going to look at your piece. I mean, we're guilty of this. Back in the past, we've made lots of these really out there infographics that got really great coverage, but these days just wouldn't get any links in the same way. So there's an example of one we did for a client called Fiction's Greatest Fiction, that looks at the books inside books. Ooh. Then we've got Vending the Rules, 28 bizarre vending machines from around the world. I've no idea why we couldn't get to 30, but there you go. And then this one, perhaps the client had too much to say on this. This is Your Blind Style Guide. Looking at different ways you can style your blinds. This type of content did really well back in the day, but these days we've got to try a lot harder, we've got to try a lot of different things to get the same results. So RIP infographics. Data-driven pieces are huge at the moment. They were talked about earlier. I definitely would encourage you, if you've got a piece of data, journalists love numbers. They do the words, we do the numbers. Also, interactives are another really solid way of building links. They are slightly higher risk, because obviously you have to invest a lot more resources into getting them. And this sort of comes under the content marketing sphere. If you want to go for this high-quality stuff that I'm not supposed to be talking about, but that's the sort of good stuff that agencies should be doing, I'd highly recommend following my head of content, Mark Porter. He does this newsletter called Content Curated. And essentially, each episode, he runs through a whole host of these amazing interactive content pieces, how they're working, what people are doing in the industry. I highly recommend you subscribe to it. You also get the must-follow marketer of the month, which is Mark Ralph here. So there's lots of different things that he's pointing out in this newsletter. If you want to get that, the slides will be, there's a link in the top there, which I will tweet at the end. So don't worry about writing that down. But yeah, I highly recommend that, because my pay rises next month, so I thought I'd flog my boss's newsletter. And if you don't trust me, that's fine, but we have won a search award for one of our really good content pieces. Catherine Ryan, unfortunately, doesn't work for us anymore. It's just an intern. Hang on. That guy looks familiar. Where have I seen him before? Oh, yeah, it's that guy. Huh. There he is in the toilets. Anyway, back to what I'm supposed to be talking about, Linkbait. I put Linkbait here, where it's essentially low risk, but really high reward. And that is essentially because, one, these pieces take pretty much no investment on your front other than like a day of your time. And two, they can get really crazy, really successful results from these pieces. So how to do Linkbait, this is the next section. So first of all, you need a good idea. There's three main ways we found work quite well for these pieces. The first is making a fake product on your website. This isn't one I did, but I wish I had. This is List, so they do like clothes and stuff. They added a subsection to their accessories section of their e-commerce website for dogs. And you could like filter it using the navigation for different types of dog that you were going to buy as an accessory for your outfit. And then they had like advice on what outfit to pair the dog with. And you could pick small, medium, or large dogs to be ordered to your house. And everyone on Twitter was like, ooh, that's a bit edgy. They then turned around and said, oh, this is just to raise awareness. A dog's just not for Christmas, it's for life, blah, blah, blah. By that stage, there'd already been like 100 articles in the media about how they were, is this a stunt, is this not kind of thing. And they'd already built the links. So fake products is a huge one. Another tactic you can use is a fake service or a joking service you've come up with. Here we've got Groupon, who are offering to name your baby for $1,000. So potentially you could do something like that if you don't strictly have an e-commerce client or website. And then finally, this is like general news stuff I found works quite well. This is a very recent one of the recent Google updates. So this cryptocurrency news website wrote this amazing blog post where they said they were shutting down because Google had completely screwed them in an update, and they were no longer going to function as a website. And then a few days later, they came back with, actually, we're not shutting down after all, ha-ha. And then they followed it up with, actually, it was not a PR stunt, honest. This original blog post has 600 linking root domains. So they must have been doing something right. And that's probably corrected the update that crushed them in the first place. I don't know. Other thing you got to think about is writing. So I would strongly recommend you remember to be funny. If you try and do one of these pieces and you try and be like shock factor, they tend to not work as well. These pieces tend to work really well for the sort of also in the news section of news websites. Also, never promise anything if you're doing like a fake product or something. You don't want anyone to try and buy it. So this is a piece we've done, and what we essentially did was we marked it as out of stock, which one, suggests the British public have gone mad for this solar-powered World Cup t-shirt, and two, stops anyone from actually trying to order one, because then you'd have like a whole host of issues with that. And also, don't be too obvious. Don't do anything on April 1st. Try and make it seem like you're being completely serious, even if the content you're writing is a bit bonkers. In terms of graphics, got a few tips. Remember that the Photoshops need to be as realistic as possible. Wherever possible, try and take actual photos of these products and then manipulate them afterwards rather than trying to like render stuff. Found that doesn't work as well. Another thing is if you're doing the fake product angle, this is something we did. We made a product and we added this logo to it as if it was a brand, and we just like replicate that on all the products we're trying to sell around this cover up your Love Bite kit, and that worked quite well. And then in terms of outreach, there's two different ways you can approach this. You can do traditional PR, sort of newsletter stuff, press releases. However, if you're doing like our website's shutting down because of a Google update, that might be a bit too obvious. So an alternative tactic, which we found works really well, you literally make up a new Gmail account, say, hi, journalist, I found this thing and I thought it was really cool, cheers, and then you just leave it at that. Then they think it seems like it's coming from a more authentic source. So that's a way of getting around like the kind of issues with that thing. So now I've got a few case studies for you guys just to finish things off. They're quite funny, hopefully. First one is Attack of the Poorly Made Clones. This is my personal favorite one. So we got this client that basically has like a warehouse where he has bankrupt people's stock, and then he sells it to eBay suppliers. So he's got like weird shit in there. And one of the weird things he had was these Star Wars figurines that were like bootleg Chinese ones that were a bit wonky and the wrong colors. They were completely unofficial. And so what we did was we photoshopped these fake names onto the boxes just to make them slightly more funny and slightly more like culturally as if like, oh, the Chinese didn't quite understand Star Wars kind of thing. So we got Toby-1 Kenobi, Flygon Jin with his red lightsaber, Mace Windu, Dennis the Phantom Menace, And then my personal favorite was Jar Jar Binks, where we just didn't bother changing the name because people hate that character. As an aside, on my Lord of the Rings stupid Twitter account, the one time I tweeted a Star Wars GIF as a joke, I have never been cyberbullied so much in my life, which just goes to show how passionate people are about this kind of stuff. And if you can make content around that, you can really trick these people into tweeting you and stuff. This thing did absolutely crazy. It got in the mail and everything, did really well. A piece has done well where if you Google it, it shows up in Google as the main thing in images. I haven't checked recently. I hope that's still the case. If Google's destroyed that website, sorry to that client. But anyway, so yeah, that's cool. And then we also got in print. Obviously, when you're in print, the PRs in the room are like, oh my God, coverage. And the SEOs are like, what domain authority is this piece of paper? But yeah, that was exciting in the Metro. So the main lesson there is make it funny and sort of tie into those fandoms. Next one is the LED World Cup T-shirt. So back in 2018, everyone was like, oh, the Russian hooligans are going to fight the British English thugs, and they're going to battle it out in Moscow or something. That's what the tabloids were saying. Anyway, that didn't really happen, but we came up with this idea. We had a client that does solar lights, so you've really got to make it niche when they do solar lights, not lights, solar lights. We came up with this idea, solar-powered LED T-shirt that called the Comrade Converter. So you approach the stadium as a proud England fan, and then when the Russian ultras show up, you're like, oh shit. At the flick of a button, your T-shirt turns into a Russian one, and then you don't get beaten up, and it's great. Yeah, this did really well as well. The best link we got from this was actually on The Guardian, because The Guardian set up a live blog of the opening ceremony. And what basically happens when you set up a live blog, at least my impression is, the editors go, we need a live blog of this event. And the junior journalist, who's the intern, goes, OK, I'll just Google what's happening for a whole day then. And then they're just starved of content. This is where we come in. So we made up Mitch Zacci, and he sent them a little quote saying oh, I saw your live blog. I thought this was funny. Maybe you should share it. And we got a link there. So yeah, that's a high DA, obviously. Mitch Zacci is obviously a lie. I don't know how we came up with that fake name. I think maybe if you're doing fake names, just make them kind of John Smith or something. I don't know. This also got in print, so we faxed that to Google, and then they uploaded it to the LinkJost machine. And we also got on TalkSport Radio, and Caroline, my colleague, who I think is sat somewhere around there, she actually got interviewed by TalkSport, which is a huge radio station, about this fake T-shirt, and she was like, guys, I'm going upstairs to do the radio interview on the phone. Do not put it on the speakers. So the first thing we did as soon as she left the room was crack up the sound system, and we had Caroline full blast. It was great. So the main lesson there is to go for these live blogs and these sort of upcoming events. If you know what's going to be in the news in the next few weeks, plan around that and have something ready to launch when it goes live. Next thing is Edit My X. This is a piece we did. So essentially we had a printing client, and we came up with this idea they would offer a service where you could edit your X out of photos. So here I am with our PR manager having a nice romantic time by the river in Henley. Don't we look cute? And I'm gone. Ouch. And here we are just hanging out, just very candid. And now I'm Harry Styles. And here we are having a little smooch, and now it's weird. This piece actually bombed and didn't get any pickup. However, this website came up more recently. This is called Edit My X, and this has done really well. So the idea was solid. This is done by a guy who I mentioned earlier called Mark Ralph, and he actually managed to get his front of his face on Japanese television. I've only had the back of my head at urinal on US television, so he's doing better than I am. And his website he made that was basically the same concept just went absolutely viral, got on all these news stories, got on the television and everything. Here he is. He's a good friend of ours. He doesn't work for us, but he's a close friend. And the main lesson I think he had was his timing. He timed it with Valentine's Day, so people were looking for that kind of content around relationships. He had better images that weren't of my ugly face. And it also seemed more legit because he had a separate website, whereas we were just doing blog post. I think if we did it again, we'd probably offer it as an e-commerce page as a service rather than having it as a blog thing, because then that seems more like something you'd outreach. Next we have is Royal Baby Princess plates. So back when the first Royal Baby was being born, everyone was really excited. They wanted to know if it was a boy or a girl. We miraculously printed 5,000 It's a Boy and 5,000 It's a Girl plates. And then when the baby was a boy, we lost all the It's a Boy plates. I don't know where they went. But we had all these It's a Girl plates we could no longer sell, which made a great story saying basically, oh, there's a massive blunder, they've overcompensated, they were too confident, and that kind of stuff really captures the media's attention. This piece did well initially, but then we followed it up, and our client here started to sell them for charity and raised a bit of awareness for sort of baby charity as well. And that gave a second round of links there. So if something like this does start to steamroll, have it in the back of your head. How can you push it further, and how can you keep chasing different sort of ways to build links? And then finally, the 7,000 Lance Armstrong DVDs, which again is kind of a similar thing. If you can have several thousand in the front of the piece, journalists are going to be like, oh, data, a number, I'll read this. So back when Lance Armstrong was caught cheating and announced it on television, we came up with the idea that we had 7,000 of his The Science of Lance Armstrong DVDs. Turns out the science was drugs, but anyway. And the brilliance of this piece is this is the only asset we made for the whole campaign. It's a bloke stood with like 12 DVDs behind some boxes. The boxes just have like random stuff in them. They don't have DVDs. So literally, a man with 12 DVDs was all it took to get on, I believe it was the BBC Radio, and it was also mentioned on the One Show, which is really cool to see. The main lesson there is, it's super easy to do. You really don't have to invest too much. As long as your idea is solid and your outreach is good, it's going to go well. So to wrap things up quickly then, the pros of Linkbait are that it's quick, it's cheap, and you can get really big wins with it. The cons of Linkbait you do have to be aware of are you need the right client. If your client does something boring like insurance, and there's people who in compliance people are the worst. If there's compliance involved, don't bother with anything like this. You also need the client to trust you. Don't show up day one with pictures of you in the Wetherspoons toilets being like, hi, I'm your new content guy, check this out. You have to like do a few other pieces first so they know you know what you're talking about. And also, you've got to be pretty quick to move if you're doing something that's topical. And also, don't do it too much, because firstly, your users will notice that you're just taking the piss. Secondly, journalists will start to clock that maybe you're sort of trying too hard with this type of content. And thirdly, there is a slight risk that Google could pick up on this. There have been cases in the past where people who have gone in and out of the sort of tabloid press for these wacky stories have been caught out. So as long as you're doing it in moderation, I think the main thing is to make it good fun. As long as you're like having a laugh with yourself. We had a case where a journalist sort of emailed us back after we outreached them. He said, I know this is fake, but it's so funny I'm going to post it anyway. And that's the kind of angle I think we're going for. We're not trying to be nasty or anything. We're just trying to have a good laugh. I'll leave you then with this quote taken in 2008 from Jane Copeland, who's another SEO. If you get away with something on this scale, for God's sake, don't tell anyone. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver.